Long Island is home to one of the largest veterans population in America. And the strength, bravery, and valor of these men and women can never be forgotten. There's one museum in Long Island, the Museum of American Armor, there to make sure that we never forget that through their heritage tourism. Hi, I'm Carlene Lavelle, and this is Did You Know, a segment on LIE Magazine where I tell you something you probably didn't know about Long Island. On this episode, we bring you to the Museum of American Armor to tell you about how you can live the war on your own in a real live experience and to check out some working tanks and military vehicles. So come on. We're going to meet with Kevin Carroll, the Director of Community Affairs, to learn more about the museum. Thanks again for having me here.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Carlene. Thank you for coming.
No problem. So the biggest question I have for you is, how did the Museum of American Armor get started and why?
Military vehicle collecting is not as esoteric a hobby as you might think. There are a lot of hobby collectors or vehicle collectors across the United States, and we have our fair share right here on Long Island. There are individuals and there are clubs. There's a museum out in Farmingdale called the Air Power Museum, another military museum, but they feature military aircraft. And people who are interested in military aircraft and vice versa, military vehicles, tend to congregate, and that's what happened out at Air Power. A lot of these club members met out there, and it was such a success, there was such a diversity of vehicles and such an interest in it that we were able actually to start this museum here in Old Bethpage.
Where do you find tanks? Like, do you go to like a tank dealership? I mean, like, how do you get them?
Well, believe it or not, kinda. I mean, tanks are everywhere, and military vehicles are everywhere. Some may consider that unfortunate because they're a product of war. But they are everywhere, and it is, again, a big interest amongst a lot of people. And vehicles in World War II, which we kind of specialize in, were produced in huge numbers. And of course, they were designed to be resilient, to last. And they did do that right up, 75 years later. There's quite a few of them around. They were produced in very large numbers. They were designed to be repaired when necessary. And again, they were very robust vehicles. And after the war, a lot of them went to our allies. So they were distributed throughout the world. A lot of them came back here to the United States, where the military gave them to civilian governments, and they were sold to private individuals as well, because they were very vehicles that had a lot of uses in municipal field, like at the highway department or the general services. And fire departments, as a matter of fact, use a lot of World War II trucks.
Really?
So they're everywhere. And the internet has created, just like so many other things with the explosion of the internet in the 90s and of course to the present, has opened up new vistas. So people across the world now are able to communicate with each other and collect, trade, and sell items, if not in entire vehicles.
Now we know how to get tanks. Even if you get them at a dealership, do they naturally work? How do you repair them? Where do you get parts? Who fixes them?
Unfortunately, we have a lot of volunteers here who can repair them. And as far as parts, again, I harken back to the internet.
Obviously, being here, I know you've been here for years, you're a historian, but I'm sure there are things that you've learned that you probably wouldn't have learned through books. So what were those things?
One thing that immediately comes to mind is I've always loved armored vehicles. I've studied them, I've read about them, I've been to a lot of major military museums in the United States. But until I came here, the ability to actually get inside them, to hear them running, to see them running, as you were talking about before, odors are sometimes are so significant, to see them, to touch them, to smell them, and most importantly, to be inside them. It offers a whole new aspect, and that's what I love.
I know for a fact you have this experience weekend, right? And I don't want to talk about it. I want to hear it from you, but I've heard you guys really give the experience down to the nitty gritty of the grains of the coffee. So can you tell me and our viewers about it?
Sure. I think you're probably referring to our Armor Experience, which
Yes.
we try to do once a month in the better weather. We start early in spring, and we'll have our last one in mid-November. We use our vehicles, and we use our living historians. They're a separate entity. They're called the Long Island Living History Association. But we work hand in glove. These are the guys and gals who actually portray infantrymen, medics, out in the field, and they're all in period correct uniform. They're carrying period correct small arms, and the tactics they're using are all correct. We take people out, and the idea is that you are embedded, if you will, with a World War II combat squad in France immediately after D-Day, June, July, August of 1944. So we put you in semi-battle dress, helmets, and we put you in one of our vehicles, and you are surrounded by our living historians and our armored vehicles, and you leave here, and you turn left, and you go to France, otherwise known as Old Bethpage Village Restoration.
Okay.
But you head up there through the back roads, through the woods, and ultimately you are going to encounter the enemy, the Germans, on more than one occasion.
Okay.
And there are mock battles. There are explosions galore. We're firing blanks. A lot of our guns, our bigger guns too, our cannons are gas fires, so they emit a big roar, a lot of muzzle blasts, but of course these are all blank rounds. We stress to make sure that it is an historical lesson. For instance, we brief you on what may happen. We give you a real style military briefing with the sergeant and all, and then we go out in the field, and as so often happens, the plan falls apart. And then there's a freeze frame in the middle where they talk about what's happened and what may happen. And then after the final battle, you come back here and you get a complete debrief. And you talk to living historians, you talk to their sergeant, and you ask all the questions you like. So it's an intense experience, something we do once a month, and something that a lot of people might be interested in, and I highly recommend it.
Well, can I see the tanks?
Absolutely.
All right,
That's
let's
why
go.
we're here.
So this is huge.
Yeah, well, you need a big building for big tanks.
But I mean, it is beyond what I would expect. You think tanks, but a place to hold all these tanks is humongous.
It's specifically designed too so we can move these vehicles around. They don't maneuver that well, like a Prius or a Volkswagen. So we need a lot of room.
I can't even touch it. So what tank is this?
This is the M48 that we talked about, Carlene. It's the vehicle that was made here in the United States, equipped a large part of the United States, or the Army and Marine Corps during the Cold War years.
You said that there's like a space in the back where...
Yes, it was knocked out in October 1973 fighting.
So this big baby got stopped by a grenade.
An anti-tank weapon of some type, a man-launched.
Okay.
Probably an RPG or a Sager missile. But at any rate, it struck right here, Carlene. This is the bracket for the towing pintle for the tank, and wasn't content. It didn't stop there, kept right on going, and actually penetrated the armor in the rear of the tank. And this is the engine transmission area, so prevented the vehicle from moving. It's called a mobility kill, in that the vehicle can no longer operate.
Okay, wait, this whole thing is the engine?
Yep, you're looking at exhaust, diesel exhaust, and then down below it is the final, what they call the final drive and the transmission. So the crew was somewhat isolated from this round because they're forward of this, so it was separated, but knocked the vehicle out nevertheless. And the crew abandoned the vehicle.
And it sat in the desert. Someone saw it and said, I want this baby home with me.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
This is a huge baby.
It is. It's about 55 tons worth of tank.
Wow. Okay, I want to see more.
Well, we have our Sherman tank here.
Okay.
Even people who don't know a whole lot about tanks will usually recognize the name Sherman. It was the primary battle tank the United States used in World War II. And it's also supplied to many of our allies, including Great Britain and Russia and the Free French Force.
Who makes tanks like this?
In World War II, the automotive companies were requested to build tanks, and another manufacturer were those companies who made locomotives and railroad cars, because they had the foundries to do very large castings and the extensive use of metal, bending metal. But this particular tank, this is a very interesting one, the M18 Hellcat, was made by the Buick Corporation.
Buick made this?
Buick made this. This is not your dad's Buick. So it shows you how American industry was able to adapt from 1 minute making cars and trucks to making tanks. As a matter of fact, this particular vehicle was designed and built under the direction of a gentleman by the name of Harley Earl.
Harley Earl.
And that may not mean anything to you, but Mr. Earl went on and stayed with General Motors, and he liked fast, strong vehicles, as witness his M18 here. But you might recognize his next success with General Motors, which was the Corvette.
Oh, so this was what delivered the Corvette.
That's correct, the same gentleman.
Let's take a look at the gun.
Yeah, the Hellcat was all about the gun, and its sole job was to encounter and destroy German armor. And again, it was made by Oldsmobile. So we have a Buick with an Oldsmobile gun.
What is this tank? Because it looks completely different from the other two that you've shown me.
Yes, good spot, Carlene. This is called the half track, and as you might be able to discern, the reason. The rear of the vehicle is a tracked vehicle, much like a tank, and yet the front of it is a wheeled vehicle, much like a truck. They did that on this particular vehicle. It's called an M3 and appropriately a half track, so that the tracked part of the vehicle would give it better maneuverability over unimproved roads, snow, and mud, you know, much like a tank or a bulldozer. And yet it gave it the steering capability of wheels themselves.
I think I could drive this in the streets today. So.
Well, you would probably want to do your weightlifting. I know you said you go to the gym.
I do, I do.
Well, you'd want to go the day before.
Really?
Because these are non-powered, there's no power steering.
No power steering.
The old joke is the power steering is by Armstrong.
Can we get in it?
Absolutely we can.
All right.
This is the crew carrying portion of the vehicle.
Do you use this for your armor experience?
We surely do. It's one of our most used vehicles, which is very appropriate because this vehicle was used in World War II to transport combat troops.
And this carried all types of loads.
It did. It was a very versatile vehicle. We have ours configured so it would carry a combat squad, a rifle squad, but it could also carry an anti-tank gun, tow an anti-tank gun, an anti-aircraft gun. So it was a very versatile vehicle, and again used in the European theater and the Pacific theater as well.
You told me you have a World War I tank.
We do. We have a M1917 on loan to us from Massachusetts Museum.
Okay.
But yeah, if you'd like to take a look at it, I'd be pleased to show you. As you may know, this is the centennial of tanks. First tanks still combat in 1917 in World War I, and here we are 100 years later with major advancements. But this is so happy birthday to the tank.
Happy birthday to the tank. Let's go. All right, so this is the World War I tank.
It is. It's an M1917, real World War I tank. It's a copy of the French FT tank. The United States decided that they wanted to have a tank in World War II, and the best bet was to copy the French design, which they did. So this was made here in the United States. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it never did get to see action in World War I because by the time it was produced, the war had ended in 1918. You can look inside. Here's the driver's compartment.
Yeah.
And standing, quasi-standing and sitting right in back of him, kind of on a sling, was the gunner. So it was a two-man vehicle, very rudimentary, low speed, but it did the job, and it was the forerunner of the tank as we know it today.
Now, I like to consider myself petite, but it's small in there. And I see no type of heater, windows.
No, you're absolutely right. And I've been told by veterans that a tank, sometimes you think that, well, you intuitively know it'll be hot in hot weather with the engine right there and all the steel around you in the desert and hot weather. But what you don't intuitively know is, I always figured, again, before I came here to the museum and spoke with a lot of veterans, well, at least it was warm in the wintertime. No way. In fact, it was sometimes colder than being outside because the steel would just rob whatever warmth was in the vehicle.
I hope that attire you showed me at least helped with some of this.
Yes, it did. To see it, American tankers, when they were in the vehicle, wore a bump helmet.
Okay.
It was made out of fibrous material because, as you point out, extremely tight. There's a lot of rocking going on with the gun firing or just going over rough terrain. So they wore a helmet, but they also wore a steel helmet because on occasion you had to get your head outside the tank to see better. Yeah, so the traditional steel pot helmet, the M1 helmet that you see on infantrymen.
Okay, I'll try it on.
Okay.
Let's go.
Let's take a look. Yes, these are typical helmets, Carlene, that would have been worn. This particular helmet would have been worn inside the tank. As we talked about, it is a fibrous material, kind of a fiberglass, actually some cardboard material as well. So it was a bump helmet. So when you were jostling around inside the tank, it would protect your noggin. And of course, the ubiquitous goggles, because they were always in a dusty environment, or rain or things like that, to protect your eyes. This was the communications cord. This is not a USB plug. We get a lot of students in here and they have no idea what this is. Unfortunately, I know exactly what it is. We use it my 8-track player, if nothing else. So an interesting aspect of this, we talked about the, if you look inside there, Carlene, you'll see a maker's mark, and it was made by Spalding. And Spalding, as you know, and most of the kids recognize, the students we have come in here, that they're a sporting goods manufacturer.
Yes.
So again, much like the Buick making the Hellcat and Oldsmobile making the gun, the civilian makers of sporting goods, there you go, transitioned into the war effort and made helmets just like this. That looks good on you, far better than me. And now that had no ballistic protection.
No ballistics, like we want ballistic protection.
Okay, well then you want the M1, the typical M1 infantry helmet, which was a steel helmet with a liner. Gave you some ballistic protection. If you see one of our exhibits over here, you'll see where a bullet actually went through a helmet. So there's no guarantees, but it certainly gave you better protection than the tanker's helmet. And again, ubiquitous goggles, because this would have been worn by either a tanker who had to get his head outside the tank, or by armored infantry troops. So you could try that baby on.
Let's see. Ooh, this is heavy.
Yeah, so imagine wearing that 24 hours a day.
Yeah, like there's no real fabric, so it gets cold.
Rudimentary suspension system, unlike you see now. I mean, that doesn't really even give you the head protection as a modern day football helmet would.
Wow.
But it was the best that was produced then, and it got a lot of guys home.
Tanks, helmets, you have all this stuff here.
We do, and a lot more too.
Okay, well, let's see it all.
Yeah, let's go.
You lead the way.
Okay.
So this is one of the vehicles you use for the armor experience.
It is, Carlene. This is the Jeep, world famous Jeep. Had its origins in World War II. It was used again in both theaters of operation. Seen everywhere for transportation of people, ammunition, supplies. We have ours outfitted for armed reconnaissance. You can see from the 30 caliber machine gun.
I'm about reconnaissance.
Yeah, okay, well we can take a look. Would you like to take a ride?
Of course I would like to take a ride.
Well, before you can take a ride, you have to be properly outfitted.
Okay.
Here's your M1 helmet, Carlene.
My M1 helmet.
Excuse me. And if I would presume to make you a corporal, Carlene.
Corporal Carlene.
All right.
All these years, I knew I was meant for great things.
Well, you'll work your way up as well. There you go. You look terrific.
Okay.
You like to take a spin now that you're out there?
Sure do.
Well, hop in.
All right, I'm going in. All right.
Now remember, these vehicles weren't built for comfort
Okay.
or speed. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's go.
All right.
But we're not going anywhere, right?
No.
We're here to enjoy the day.
This bad boy is moving.
Well, kinda. It can go a lot faster. If the Germans are behind you, it'll go really, really fast.
So, what are these?
That, Carlene, are the windshield wipers. If you could take care of that, thank you. That's no frills version. This is not the...
So you have to move this yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, harder it rains, the faster you gotta go.
And then, I don't think this is an automatic vehicle,
It's not an automatic transmission. Most of our vehicles are standard transmission. This is 3 forward speeds, reverse. It is 4-wheel drive to get you through snow and mud.
And then all these guns. There's one up here.
Yeah, this Jeep, Carlene, is configured probably as you would have seen it for armed reconnaissance in the war. So you have your M1 carbine there, your personal weapon. There's a Sniper 1903 bolt-action rifle here, and above us is a 30 caliber machine gun.
And I must say, like, I know we're not going too far, but with this helmet on, it gets heavier the more I drive in this car.
Absolutely. Yes. Imagine wearing that 24 hours a day.
And then there's no seat belts.
No seat belts, no airbags, no heat, no air conditioning. Well, kind of air conditioning today with everything open.
Well, I think I appreciate my car a lot more right now.
Oh, you surely will. But this is a lot of fun, you got to admit, huh?
It is a lot of fun.
Kind of like driving a roller skate.
It is. And then you put this in the woods with the Armor Experience.
We do, yes, we do. Yes. This vehicle belongs to Mark Renton, the director. Mark is, I call him Mr. Jeep.
Mr. Jeep?
Mr. Jeep. He knows everything about Jeeps more than you'd ever want to know.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you taking me around the Museum of American Armor.
So we're done with our reconnaissance.
I think so. I think I've done all the reconnaissance I needed to do.
Shall we go back in the barn?
I think we should go back in the barn.
Okay.
Woo. So that was an excursion.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of fun. It was an experience, as we say.
It was an experience, and I feel like I have a better sense of the war, of what our soldiers have done, and there's a lot more to see, so you'll see me again.
Well, we would be delighted. Thank you. We can't wait for that. And actually, so you did get the experience, the classroom back and forth that we were asking about or talking about before. That's what we love to do here.
Yeah. Well, I think it's appropriate to say thank you.
Oh, well, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you. I'll see you later, Kevin.
What a pleasure.
All
Thanks,
right.
Carlene.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. If you have any comments, cool facts, or suggestions for our next Did You Know segment, send us a note at info@patv.org.